Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Doing Bart Things. Today, myself, Bart, uh, in this decidedly low rent production, as you guys can see, I'm basically recording this from the kitchen, as per my usual habitation. We're going to talk a little bit today about monitors because most of the time when someone comes to me and they say, "Hey, Bart, like, I want to build a gaming rig," and I ask them, okay, is it specifically a gaming machine? Yes. Okay, cool. The next question I ask is, what display or what monitor are you planning on using? And can I get the details of that screen? Because that massively impacts when it comes to gaming and what kind of gaming you're doing, uh, what the overall cost of the system is going to be. Um, I mean, the way that you interact with a video game is through the screen, and matching your display to video card uh, will go a long way in determining your overall budget, because essentially video cards, you can just right off the bat factor in half of your cost of building a dedicated gaming machine is going to be wrapped up into that one part, because that's the part that actually does the rendering. It's what makes it look the way it looks. And that's why I basically say, all right, if you want a gaming machine, um, the first step in determining what sort of gaming machine you're going to have, what kind of components, mainly video card, because again, that's the most single expensive component you usually put in a gaming machine. What kind of screen you're going to be running, what resolutions, how fast. And I'm not going to go into super big details on actual features of screens or anything today. The main point I want to make is resolution versus refresh rate. How do those two things play into each other? I'm going to be assuming a very demanding AAA title. I recommend highly for anybody that's going to build a gaming machine, the number one thing you should do, even before this, is write down what games you're going to play. Because if all you're playing is Team Fortress, for example, doesn't really matter. Like, that game runs on a potato. So you can save yourself quite a bit of money if, like, you're very specifically building something to play a specific non-demanding title. But let's assume, like, you're into something like, let's say, Hogwarts Legacy. You're into Call of Duty Modern Warfare. You're one of the folks that wants to have the visual experience to go along with the frame rate. And so basically, I'm kind of coming at it from that angle. But again, you don't need a 4090 to play World of Warcraft. I'm just saying. When I played World of Warcraft, for example, way back in the day, the way that I built my machines is I would literally look at a different title. I would go find a different video game that was more demanding that I would play to see what the benchmarks were for that, and then I would go by acting like I was building it for that game versus World of Warcraft, because it just didn't take that much power. And I think it's still kind of true today. But MMOs are sort of their own bucket of love. So maybe we can look at some benchmarks and talk about specific titles. But today, this is just a very generalist video about starting the process of deciding on a budget and what we want to buy for a gaming rig. So to me, it just all starts with the monitor when it's a dedicated gaming machine, because that's where you're going to be interacting with games, so you're going to be playing them. So what you spend on a monitor and what kind of monitor you buy will help you determine what video card you need, and then that's basically you've got half of the price of the PC itself at that point. You typically can take that, double it, and then that's basically kind of where your budget for your whole machine is going to fall, roughly. Okay, So looking at this, looking here, I've got some examples of some 1080p monitors. So when we say 1080p, that's 1920 by 1080, and that's basically measuring the. So if I zoom in here, so 1920, so the big number, the first number is going to be, let's see, yeah, it's going to be across the bottom. I believe that's your vertical, and then 1080p is horizontal. Memory serves, because basically it's like 1080 times 1920. That probably didn't show up very well. Oh, you can see my mouse cursor, so we're good. So, but yeah, basically, 1080, 1920 is left to right. And that's like pixels by pixels. So if you multiply these together, you'll get the actual count. But just know that that's a count of that, and basically it determines kind of like what the resolution of the screen is, how much can it actually display at one time. And then this is a 75 hertz LED monitor. So anything that is, say, 1080p below 100 hertz, roughly, you really don't need to go super expensive. You can go with maybe up to $300 video card and be more than happy. I personally would not buy a 27-inch screen for a 1080p resolution. I've seen them. To me, it's not great for gaming. It gets very pixelated. 27 inches are where I think 1440p starts to be the best, kind of the best compromise resolution. But that's neither here nor there. I don't want to get into that today. Just know 1080p below 100 hertz, because hertz, basically you kind of want your hertz and frame rate to match, ideally. You want a machine that's capable of, like, this is 75 hertz, so you want a machine that is capable in the games you're going to play. Ideally, it's not going to be perfect, guys. Like, it's but somewhere around 60 to 75 hertz is kind of where you want to have your base frame rate kind of be. And when it all lines up, it sort of cuts down on the lag, it cuts down on jitteriness, that kind of thing, ideally. But that's kind of where you want to be, and really spending a whole lot on a video card isn't necessary with a 1080p screen at that refresh rate. So you're talking, as an example, previous gens would work, like your 3060s, your 6600, 6700 RX cards, your hell, even like if you can find it, like getting your hands on a 2000 series, like a 2070, 2060. If you have an old, if you have an old 1080, and you're running a 1080 resolution, the 1080 for 1080, GTX 1080 or 1080 Ti, you're probably okay. You're probably okay. You probably don't need to worry about that unless you either upgrade screens or you get like just the, like if you're running Hogwarts Legacy with like everything turned on, you might be running into some issues. So I would say newer games, 1080p below 100 hertz, you probably are good with just your low-end cards. You don't need to think too much about going crazy. What about over 100 hertz? So here we have 165 hertz screen. Okay. All right. You're kind of in the same ballpark. Maybe consider stepping up to like something in the RX 6700, Intel A750, say A770, maybe 3060 Ti. When they come out, maybe a 4060, but gosh, I just hate the price of those cards. I really do. I really think they're a ripoff. Again, I'm not here to I want to be clear. All these companies do scumbaggery things. They're all corporate entities. They're not non for profit. They're trying to make money. Okay? So they're going to do things that are a little unsavory on occasion. Um, Asus recently has kind of gone over the ledge to where it's like, okay, you need to reel that back in. Like, I'm not recommending any Asus products. This is for demonstration purposes only. At the moment, we'll see if they kind of backwalk some of the nonsense that they've been doing, and hopefully, when we hear more about that, maybe we'll be like, okay, we're okay with Asus again. Um, but you can almost throw any of these companies under the bus, though. At one point or another, they've done something really horrible. So I want to make sure everybody understands. Like, I respect your purchase, what you've chosen to spend money on. I'm just here to provide maybe a little bit of information to help kind of guide that choice without my specific buying preferences. Unless that's a preference that literally manifests itself in actual performance, I'm trying not to press that upon you. If you want to buy an Asus monitor, by all means, go buy it. I'm just saying that with their support record, with the latest from their motherboards and stuff, I'm not really into Asus right now. But for the sake of argument, this is a 165 hertz screen at the same 1080p resolution. And this is where it starts to get, again, you start to go, okay, well, I could step up a little bit and maybe get some more value or get some more fidelity at a higher refresh rate. Basically, now you're talking, like the 70 series from NVIDIA, like your 4070, maybe 4070 Ti, but I think that's even maybe too expensive. You're probably looking at like maybe a 4070-ish performing card, 6900 from AMD, and below, and maybe down to, I probably wouldn't go below like a 6750 XT or a 3060. I think is kind of where I would place that. If you want to try to take advantage of 165 hertz, maybe at medium to medium high detail on some of these games. Ultra quality, guys. Ultra quality is, if you're, everybody sets their stuff to ultra quality, and if you want to do that in every game, then you might as well just go buy yourself a 4090. Okay? Because these games are so demanding that when you put on just all the ultra settings, and the deal is, when you go down to high in a lot of these games, you can't tell the difference in actual fidelity. Like, your eyeballs, or at least my eyeballs, maybe my eyeballs suck. They do suck. So maybe that's where my problem is. But you can't really tell. You can sure as hell tell when you're getting 35 frames per second versus 160 frames per second. You'll be able to tell that. You'll be able to tell extreme dips, like if you go from 165 down to 40. Like, you'll be able to tell that kind of stuff, right? But you won't be able to tell if a tree off center in the right hand corner 300 yards away has a shadow. Okay? Like that, that's, I don't know. It's balancing for everybody, each their own. I'm just saying, if you want like ultra settings, if that's a thing for you, and you don't go into your games and tweak the settings, and you just want to set it to ultra and forget about it, then you might as well go buy the most expensive video card that you can find and go about your day. But for us normal humans who don't want to spend that much money, this might be helpful to realize. Okay, always find a tweak guide for the games that you're playing, and go figure out how to turn on and off video settings and get the settings that work right for you. And a lot of times, when you buy a video game that you want to play and you do this, it's a set and forget kind of thing. You'll do it once and forget about it, and you'll be able to reap the benefits of having higher frames per second, which will, generally speaking, cause the game to be more fluid, to be more responsive, that sort of thing. Anyway, I digress. thanks for following me off on that tangent, but it just amazes me. Like all the benchmarks are on, ultra quality, all the settings. It's like, man, I get it, but if you want to hold on to a video card for a long time, ultra settings sometimes are not your jam. Okay, so 165 hertz, we'll say like AAA high settings. Like I was saying, 4750 XT, 6750 XT, 6800 XT, 3060 Ti, 4060 maybe, 4060 Ti maybe, 4070 maybe. I hate the price of those cards. They're so expensive. So I don't know about the 40 series in this realm where we're actually trying to, save a buck, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Okay, so high refresh rate, that's high refresh rate 1080p. What about stepping up to 1440p? Some other choices here, like let's say these are all really high refresh rate. Holy cow, 280 hertz, 165 hertz. So if you're going at like 60 to 100 hertz, I actually had a really good monitor it was an Asus one that was FreeSync, and it went up to 90 hertz using FreeSync. And I found that a great combo with like a 5700 XT back in the day. And it worked with a 1080 and it was really good. So anything up to 100 hertz or so at 1440p doesn't really take much more than your 60, well, like 120, 144, 165 hertz 1080p. It's pretty much on par. You can rationalize stepping up another tier for your 165 hertz, 170, 240. I would say 240 at 1440p. You now want to start thinking about stepping up to that solid mid-range card, like 6950 is actually a really good bargain right now. I believe at about $600. I think it's about $600 if memory serves. 6800 XT, that's kind of the AMD side of things. NVIDIA, now you're talking maybe 3070 Ti if you can find and get your hands on them for a reasonable price. Maybe, solid 4060 Ti is not out yet, so I hate to quote on that, but maybe that card as well. So that just solid mid-range card for a high refresh rate 1440p for most games I think is good. Again, if you're going to turn it up to ultra, then just go ahead and buy your 4090. Like that's kind of where that is. But yeah, for 1440 is not. I love 1440p as a resolution because it's kind of that sort of do-all resolution where it looks very nice, and it's still not. These newer video card generations, 1440p doesn't just beat them into the ground like 4K does. So you can do high resolution, or you can, I'm sorry, not high resolution. You can do high refresh rate 1440p kind of on a semi-budget and actually have some pretty good success with it, I feel. So I do really like that resolution. Same goes for the mid-step, which is not, like these are widescreens. There's also ultra-wide widescreens that are 1440p. I've got like a 49-inch actually, which is 5120 by 1440, and it honestly is not bad. It's definitely a step up. I'm running it on a 3080, for example, and I would say it's definitely a midstream and up monitor, but it's still not. It still doesn't put a beating down like a 4K screen would at high resolutions. So 1440p, very good resolution. I like it a lot, and there's starting to be some OLED screens in this resolution, which I'll save OLED for a different video, but it's really cool. So now, so again, solid midstream to upper mid market card for 1440p slash high refresh rate. Okay, 4K. Now, 4K, and the reason why a lot of people don't run 4K is unless you upsample, unless you use features of your video card to like FSR2 or DLSS, it is the card killer. It will chug just about anything down under the right title with the right circumstances. The 4090 is the one card that you could probably buy, and every title 4K with a little bit of massaging will run at a decently high frame rate, even for the high frame rate monitors. And it goes all the way down to your upper mid-tier cards to the extreme high end is what I'd recommend. So take, for example, this is a 60 hertz 4K screen. Depending on what you play, I would say your basement card, to ensure at least some longevity, is a 6950 XT, right? That's where you start. That was last gen's high end, which is now kind of a mid-range card price-wise, and that's kind of where I would start. I would say, okay, 6950 XT, maybe you can get away with a 6800 XT. I just think for the money, if you're spending it to get a 4K monitor and you really want a 4K gaming experience in AAA titles, then you should look upper mid-range to ultra high-end. The ultra high-end comes in when you start looking at screens that do more than 60 hertz. They get into the 100 hertz range. Let me see if we can find some, like it's still 60 hertz. Here we go, 138 hertz. This is actually, I think this is an OLED. Yeah, 4K UHD, 138 hertz. Let me tell you, if you play Hogwarts Legacy, if you play Cyberpunk, and you're like, I want to turn everything on and I want to use all the hertz of this screen, like I want the frame rate to be high. Okay, go get yourself 4090. Build a top-end machine that's going to cost you somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000, basically. And that's kind of the way that is, right? Because you're going to need, this is just a massive amount of area. It's a huge amount of pixels. It's at least 4 times over what 1080p is, and you're pushing it at 138 hertz. You're going to need a lot of machine to do that. 60 hertz, again, you can kind of fudge and get away with, I say fudge, you can get away with, an upper mid-range to lower high-end card. But there is no, if you actually want to do this refresh rate in very new, modern, top, AAA titles, you need to be prepared for, you're going to need to either tweak down settings, or you're going to need to get basically the best of the best. And that's kind of how that works. So 1440p, you can still play around with mid-range cards a bit. 4K, upper mid-range to lower high-end cards. But the moment that you go 4K high refresh rate, it's not time to mess around anymore. You're going to want to, if you're ever going to rationalize getting a high-end card, that would be a reason why. So that's kind of where that sits. I'm going to put like sort of a blurb in this video to kind of describe, the difference in sort of cards that maybe fall into each one of these categories, so that way you can kind of see. But needless to say, 1080p, 60 hertz, potato, right? Whatever you can afford. $100 video card, $200 video card, it should run that okay. Maybe even onboard graphics for certain chips, like you have your AMD APUs. Those probably could even handle some light 1080p 60 hertz gaming for sure. When you get 1080p to 165 hertz to 240 hertz, or you want just a high refresh rate of like and high frames per second, okay, you step up to your mid-range, upper mid-range cards maybe, and so on and so forth, right? And it's when you get to honestly 4K that you justify your 7900 XTXs, your 4080s, your 4090s, is where that comes into play. Anyway, that's it. I've rambled on long enough. Man, I hope somebody finds this video helpful and understands why when, a lot of times if someone who knows what they're doing, I believe when you ask them like, hey, I want to build a gaming machine, what's the first thing I need to figure out? Figure out what you're going to display it on, because that will backwards determine we need this video card, and then if we're getting this video card, we're going to match this CPU motherboard with it. Obviously, you'll need some storage, what memory. Like, it's just you kind of work from what result you want backwards to build what machine you actually need and what fits into your budget. So hopefully that helps. Guys, thanks again for withstanding this assault of boring video as I flip through web pages, but you did get to see my face. I'll apologize for that as well. Like if you like, subscribe if you would. Otherwise, have a fantastic day and a great week. Thank you.